Good afternoon, Patriots. This is the American Vision with your host, Bill Muckler, on the TLBTV network, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project. And I'm coming to you today from my studio in my home in Cocoa, Florida, which is on America's beautiful space coast. Today we want to talk about some topics that are going to come up in the news pretty quickly. But I want to first start out talking a little bit more about my American vision and where I left off the last time I talked about it. Then I also want to talk about paradigm paralysis, the problem that Americans are facing today. And also I want to talk about what's coming up with, that we're going to hear a lot about the budget and taxes and continuing resolutions. And I want to talk about those a little bit. So that's what we have in store today. When I left you the last time, I talked about the jobs Americans won't do. And I talked about how I went through college and my dad paid for my college. And that was great. And it was $1,000 a year total. But that didn't include my spending money. So I had to come up with ways to do that. And I talked also about how I had a savings account that I had built up at one of the community savings and loan associations that we had very popular at that time. So what I did is, like a lot of the guys I went to college with, we worked odd jobs around town. I was in Columbia, Missouri at Mizzou, and we could pick up some extra spending money just working odd jobs, helping clean up places, do all sorts of types of things. Then also we worked Christmas holidays. A lot of the guys worked for the post office, delivering mail because Christmas cards at that time were very popular and in demand. So that was a way to make money. And there were a lot of companies that were looking for part-time help or temporary help when their regular full-time employees went on Christmas breaks, Christmas vacations. And then we also worked summer times. I worked a couple of summers for my dad, filling in as a temporary vacation replacement. So the people that worked there could go on vacation. And so I did that. And when I did, I made 65 cents an hour. I made minimum wage. That's what we got paid. And I was happy to have a job because I saved some of that money. I spent some of it, I saved some of it, and it went into my savings account, and that's what I used for when I went to school. One summer, I didn't tell you about this, but there were 5 of us. We heard about these great jobs in Wisconsin, and so we thought, hey, we'll find out about this, and we're going to go up to Wisconsin because we heard we could get rich. And we did. We went up there, and boy, did we get rich. You know what we did? We worked for a company called the California Packing Company in Markeson, Wisconsin, and they were a division of Del Monte. And you all heard of Del Monte, probably didn't hear their California Packing Division because that's a subsidiary. And you know what we did? We were pea pickers. We worked in the fields picking peas. Whoever would have thought that college boys would do that? And while we were there doing that, we stayed in barracks. And there were a lot of people. These were big buildings, and we were in there with migrant workers from mostly from Mexico, and all sorts of who knows who. And we used to get up early in the morning, and we'd get up at 5:30. We would eat breakfast at a big mess hall they had there, and then they would truck us out in these big open steak trucks out to the fields, and that's what we would do. We would work picking peas, and we were getting minimum wage, 65 cents an hour, doing the jobs that Americans won't do. A bunch of migrant workers, who knows if they had green cards or whatever their status was. We worked with them. We got along with them just fine. Got along with everybody because everybody wanted to work. And boy, what a break that was, because when we worked there, we were getting rich because we were working 12 to 16 hours a day. They would actually bring our lunches and dinners out to us out in the fields. And of course, they our room, our lodging, if you want to say that, working and living in this big bunkhouse was free, and our meals were free. So the 65 cents an hour we made was all ours. Of course, the government took a chunk of that out. And then I used to keep track of what I was doing. And when I got up to 40 hours a week, which is sometime on Wednesday usually, I was thinking, hey, I got it made. I'm making $1 an hour, roughly $1 an hour, because we're making time and a half. And we actually cleared about $1,000 that summer working as pea pickers. Which college kids would do that today? We didn't have credit cards. We had cash, and we took care of our money. And so we did that. Then I did a lot of other jobs when I was an officer in the Marine Corps. It wasn't like, oh, I just went around and told some people what to do. That wasn't it. Here's what I did. I went through training in Quantico for 1 full year. Then, and I was fortunate enough to be given an overseas duty, which happened to be in Hawaii. By the way, I got my Kaneohe Clipper golf shirt on the day that I got it. A lovely lady bought for me at the golf course pro shop at the Kaneohe Bay Marine Corps Air Station. We went there in 2012. So I've had the shirt for a while. I take care of it. I don't wear it too often, just special occasions. So anyway, I went to a school in Panama City, Florida, Tyndall Air Force Base, and learned to become a air defense control officer. Why did I do that? I did because that's what the Marine Corps assigned me to do. That was my job. I learned how to do that, and I learned it well. And when I went to Hawaii, I was a very junior second lieutenant. And after 6 months, I was actually given the assignment of being a senior air director of our squadron. There were only 3 of us that were senior air directors. So that was my job, senior air director. But guess what? I also had a job as assistant administrative officer. So when the admin officer wasn't there, I filled in for him. I also was given the job of being the custodian of the secret and confidential files, which meant I took care of all classified material in the squadron. And after I did that for a few months, the CO came to me and said, his name was Bill Gus. I used to fly with him. He used to take me up, and I'd ride in the back seat. He actually showed me how to fly. He even had me fly through the sound barrier in an F-9 FAT one day over Kaalavi Island. Boy, that was a thrill. That was awesome. So he said, Bill, we don't have an officer in the squadron other than the CO and myself and the exec, and we can't do this. We need somebody to be our top secret officer. So we're going to get you a top secret security clearance. I said, don't you have to have 10 years in service? Yes, you do, but we got a special waiver from the commandant. And so I was investigated. They came around my neighborhood. They did everything, investigated me, and I got a top secret security clearance. And by the way, Bill, Colonel Gus said, you're going to be our acting S2 officer, meaning intelligence officer. So you'll attend all the group Mag 13, Marine Air Group 13 intelligence briefings, and you're going to do that. Plus, I was involved in a lot of other work involved in the squadron. So whenever anything came up, we did it. Nobody asked questions or said, oh, we can't do that, or you're invading our safe space. And when I handled top secret security material, I had to go over to Pearl Harbor and pick that up. So I got the Jeep, and I drove the Jeep over there, and I was packing. I had a loaded 45, and there was a round in the chamber. Let me tell you, there was. And I was told, top secret material, you guard it or else, type of thing. So I knew if somebody tried to take that away from me, they were dead. Then, which brings another thing up. We also had to qualify. So Marine officers, are also riflemen. And so we had to go out and qualify every year on the rifle range. And because I had so many duties, and plus standing officer of the day duty, which is a 24-hour round-the-clock type of thing, once about every 10 days or so. Didn't have a whole lot of time to go out and practice, so I had to go out and we had M1 rifles. I qualified. I shot expert with the M1. I also had my 45 M1911, and I shot expert with that also because I went out and I qualified for that. So those are the types of things we did. And I bring all this up to let you know that at that time, the life was just completely different than it was today. We've seen our freedoms and our liberties and everything that we held dear slowly evading and evolving and dripping away from us. They're taking away everything from us and convincing us that these are jobs Americans won't do. Americans don't have to do these jobs. Why? Why is that? There's no logical reason for that other than the fact that that's the only way they can control us. If they can pay us not to work, they can control us. Isn't that right? Think about that a little bit. How can you control somebody if you don't have any control over their money or their livelihood or where they live or where they eat, where they sleep? Huh? That's just the way it goes. So what we're faced with is we've got a country where they've convinced us that the jobs Americans won't do, so we have to bring in people to do those jobs. And we have to pay them $15 an hour. $15 an hour? I was lucky if I made $15 a day when I was young, and I saved that money. Now people can't live on $15 a day because the Federal Reserve has inflated our money to a point where a dollar is only worth about 3 cents today. That's the purchasing power we have out of a dollar. So while in my lifetime, I've watched wages go up 10%. I've watched prices go up 20 to 30%. What kind of purchasing power do we have today? Not near as much as we used to have. We don't have much of anything we used to have, but people don't understand that because they have paradigm paralysis. Okay, paradigms. Everybody's starting to hear this word paradigm. I've been following this word and following paradigms for a long, long time. And I understand it. So when you have a paradigm, it causes you to think a certain way. That's your paradigm. And in a sense, what it does is it puts you inside of a box. So you can't think outside the box. Now, I'm going to give you an example of I'm going to give you an example of paradigm paralysis. I'm going to tell you what a paradigm is. Paradigm is a theory or group of ideas about how something should be done, made, or thought about. So let's think about how the government operates today. One of the things they have is an IRS and income taxes, and we're locked into that. We have paradigm paralysis. We think that is the only way it can be done. It cannot be done any other way than through the government taking our money from us and them spending it wisely. Does anybody really believe the government can spend our money wisely? Does anybody really believe that a congressperson, a senator, who has no earthly experience on how to do anything in the real world, tell the American people who are working out here and doing jobs that they know better for us about how we should spend our money and how we should work and how we should be regulated? Come on, folks. You've got paradigm paralysis if you think that. Don't fall into that trap of being a person who thinks the way it is the way it has to be. And this cliche about it is what it is, God, please stop saying that, people. Stop saying it is what it is. Do you realize how stupid it sounds to say it is what it is? It's almost as stupid as saying, well, it is what it is at the end of the day. And that's the bottom line. How did we fall into these crazy, stupid cliches that the government has just caused us to think about, and they rule our lives because we think it is what it is. But folks, it ain't what it is. So I'm going to give you an example of a paradigm and paradigm paralysis. And in doing so, a lot of times people ask me to read from my book, and I want to show you. Here's my book, 2020, A Clear Vision for America. I wrote this book, and it's a real book. Remember I told you all about it has a spine, something our congressmen and our media don't have. Get a spine, folks. People wonder, hey, is that a real book? Or did you just mimeograph some pages? Because that's what a lot of people do. No, this is a real book. It's got everything. See, it's got a cover. Whoops. See, it's even got me in there. Okay. I'm going to my book now. Pardon me for just a second. And I'm going to read you a passage from my book because people always say, hey, read a passage from your book. So I'm going to read something on paradigms. And I'm going to give you an example of a paradigm. And I'm going to let you understand why you have to break this. You got to bust your paradigms. You can't continue to live life with paradigm paralysis. So my characters in the book, I have 4 characters in the book, and they discuss these different things, and they discuss them based on their experience, which are experiences that I've had working with a lot of very, I think, astute and wise people. The greatest barrier to a paradigm shift is the reality of paradigm paralysis, the inability or refusal to see beyond current models of thinking. This is a difficulty of thinking outside the box. The belief that contrasting solutions will make things better. Historic examples include rejection of the quartz clock, Galileo's theory of a heliocentric universe, a discovery of electrostatic photography, and xerography. I can give you thousands of examples of paradigm paralysis, but I'm going to just give you one that I hope you can relate to because it's thinking out of the country along with thinking outside the box. So this is the character Dave is saying. However, it helps a lot when we give them examples of the Swiss watch story or others like the story of Galileo. I expect they can relate to the Swiss watchmakers. They were fine craftsmen and well known for doing excellent work. Sound like a lot of Americans that lost their factory jobs and lost their craftsman jobs, skilled jobs. Think about that, folks. Paradigm paralysis. He did not come. So anyway, I'm talking about Dave there. He said, this is another character steps in and says, but it wasn't enough to save their industry. And they're talking about the Swiss watch industry in Switzerland. In 1968, the Swiss dominated the watchmaking industry, producing 65% of the watches in the world, combined with realizing 80% of the profits. 65% of the market share, 80% of the profits. That was the Swiss watchmakers. Boy, they had a dynamic industry going there, didn't they? However, just 10 years later, their market share took a nosedive to 10%. 65% to 10%, nosedive. That's what paradigm paralysis will do to you, folks. It's a serious thing. It's happening to us here in America today. So there were 65,000 Swiss watchmakers employed in 1968. 10 years later, down to about 6,000. They lost 90% of their jobs. Okay. What happened was the digital watch was introduced at one of their conferences. They used to have an annual conference on watchmaking every year. I suspect they still do. And they talked about, new discoveries and new techniques and different types of watches and so forth. So at one of these worldwide conferences, here's what happened. Several companies not prominent in watchmaking. In other words, they had nothing, no history in watchmaking, didn't make watches. These are several companies. They envisioned a new kind of watch. Okay, think of it, a new kind of watch. And these interlopers were not confined to by the old technology. In other words, they thought outside of the box. They did not have paradigm paralysis. And they visualized new opportunities. I want you to think about all this, thinking outside the box, thinking of new opportunities. So the Swiss could not fathom the device could be a timepiece without gears and springs and jewels and tiny parts. That was their paradigm. That was the only way they could think a watch could be made. So what happened? Seiko and Texas Instruments, as outsiders, were two companies saw a great opportunity in a new technology because they could think outside the box. So they took over the market the Swiss had once dominated, completely took it over. Now almost everyone wears a digital watch. Now, who invented this new technology? Does anybody have any idea? Was it Japanese? Was it those guys from Texas Instruments in Dallas? Or is there some geniuses somewhere that did that? Think about it. Who could think outside the box and then come up with a new technology that would revolutionize the entire watchmaking world, which really revolutionized everything that we do as far as time today? And we're all concerned about time. What time are we going to get up? What time are we going to bed? What time are we going to eat our meals? What time are we going to go to work? What time do we catch the plane? What time do we leave for work? All those things have to do with time. And we're looking at digital watches. Who developed that technology? Think about that. Who had the ability to think outside the box? You don't know, do you? Well, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to surprise you when I tell you, because this is really going to set you back on your heels. It was the Swiss themselves developed this new technology. The Swiss did. But their paradigm paralysis caused them to believe that a watch could not be made any other way than the traditional way they made their watches, and so they completely rejected that, and now they're the ones who suffered for it because they had paradigm paralysis. Now, why do I tell you this story? I tell you this story because as Americans, we're led to believe that the way our government operates and the way they budget and the way they collect taxes and the way they assess taxes is the only way it can be done. It cannot be done any other way. And anybody that thinks it can be done a different way has to be rejected. We have to reject them. We cannot listen to them. We cannot accept what they say because we do not have the ability to think outside of the box. We are victims of paradigm paralysis. Probably the worst disease in America today is paradigm paralysis because it affects everything else. So if you're thinking about health problems, your health problems can be solved very easily by taking care of yourself and having the money to be able to afford medical care. We can't do that because we owe everything to the government, because that's what the government has forced us to believe. They've indoctrinated us. They've programmed us. They've caused us to not be able to think outside of the box. They caused us to have paradigm paralysis. So we can't think of the opportunities that are ahead of us because we're saddled with these government regulations and government taxes. It's all been programmed into us over the last 50 or 60 years. So if you talk to somebody like me, you say, oh, he's one of them old guys. What does he know? Well, what I know is a different perspective, and I have a different paradigm. And guess what? I can think outside of the box because I've been experiencing this all of my life. I've had to be creative. I've had to be a creative thinker, a creative problem solver. That's what we need in America today. So what's happening to us is we have no opportunities because we don't believe we have opportunities, but we do. We can change this whole system that they have. So I said that I was going to talk about budgeting. Okay, let's talk about the way our Congress budgets. And I'm going to relate this back to when I was an officer in the Marine Corps. I remember back in 1961, or 1960 actually, I'm sorry, 1960. I was a senior art director, and I had been a senior art director for a few months, and our CEO brought us in and said, look, our year's coming to a close, and we've got a certain amount of money budgeted for us, and we're way below our budget. And so if we do not spend this money, our budget will be decreased, it'll be reduced, and we won't have that money for the next year. And we may need it next year, so we've got to find ways to spend this money. And we all started talking about it. And we came up with a few ideas of a few things we really needed, and most of them had to do with repairs and replacement of some radar and radio equipment we had. But we came to the conclusion, we don't need to spend this money. Why do we need to take taxpayer money? We don't have to do that, and we don't have to have a certain budget. Pardon me. Just because that budget number was made up doesn't mean that we have to go out and figure out ways to spend money or waste money. So you see, that was the philosophy that we had. That was our perspective. We didn't think that we had to do it that way. Now, fast forward to today. What happens today? If a government agency has some money that they haven't spent in their budget, they go ahead and they spend it somehow. They waste it, they do something with it, but they spend it because they know they can take it from the taxpayers, because the taxpayers got paradigm paralysis. They think that what they're doing is great and it'll work and it's just fine. So we'll just continue to do that. Now let me tell you what the big con game is. We have not had a budget since 2008. The government has not had a budget since 2008. So, you know what we have? We have CRs. Everybody thinks, oh, CR, that's a wonderful thing, because you can't think outside the box because you can't identify what a CR is. But a CR is a continuing resolution. Let me tell you about the con of the continuing resolution. Instead of creating a budget and balancing the budget, which, by the way, is impossible to do. It's systematically impossible to do for the way Congress does it. What we'll do is we'll take that old budget and we'll continue to fund it in such a way that we'll just add more money to that old budget, and we'll just keep spending the taxpayers' money because we can get away with it. We can get away with it if we want to do it, because they won't know any better, because they're locked into paradigm paralysis. They don't think that it can be done any other way. So now here we are. We have continuing resolutions. Well, then what comes up along with the continuing resolutions? You guessed it. Well, we have to raise the debt limit because we're spending more than what we're bringing in. And when somebody spends more money, pardon me, spends more money than what they bring in, they go into debt. Our country has gone into debt, serious national debt, more than $20 trillion. And if you look at the unfunded liabilities, a lot of people think it's well more than $100 trillion, maybe even up to $200 trillion. Who's going to pay for that? Are our kids going to be able to pay for that? Our grandkids? I don't want my kids and grandkids to pay for that. And you shouldn't either. You should cure your paradigm paralysis. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to raise the national debt limit. And if we raise the debt limit, then what we can do is we can spend more money. And if somebody says, no, no, you can't raise the debt limit, it's as high as it can go because it's already approached the GDP level. And when that happens, it's total catastrophe. The Democrats all say, well, don't worry about the debt. It's no big thing. We've always had debt. Pardon me today, today, folks. I'm really sorry. The whole idea of the debt is we don't have to have debt. We don't have to operate with debt. The United States of America can operate debt-free. We can operate a government within the limits of what we bring in revenues. We do not have to spend more than what we bring in. Let me give you the fallacy of what's happening today and what they've convinced us of. They've convinced us that we have to continue to spend money and that it's okay. Let me give you an example. Let's say we have a family that makes $40,000 a year, which is a little bit less than what the average mean annual income is. Let's say $40,000 a year is what they bring in. That's after taxes. Okay, so they got $40,000 to spend. But what happens is they don't really watch their budget too much, and they're not really very good at purchasing things, and they're not really very good at controlling their spending. And they have some emergencies come up, and they decide they want to go on a nice vacation, all those types of things. So they end up spending $50,000, but they don't have 50. They only got 40. So what do? They have credit cards. And so they get their credit card and they put it on their credit card. And they say, well, we want to go on a vacation. How can we go on a vacation? Well, we'll pay a little down on we'll pay our credit card down a little bit so we can go out and go on vacation. Well, then they find out, we want to buy a new car and we've got all these other things to pay for. And now what are we going to do? Well, let's get on the phone and call the credit card company and let's increase the credit limit. And once we increase our credit limit, then we'll be able to be okay. So now what we've done is we've taken this hypothetical family that makes $40,000 a year, they're spending $50,000 a year, who now have a credit card debt that has gone up, but they've raised their credit card limit, the debt ceiling, they've raised it. So now they've got some room to spend some more money. And the money they're going to spend is money they ain't got. And that's what our federal government's doing today. Federal government is spending more money than they got, and they're raising the credit limit, the debt ceiling, so they can spend more money that they ain't got. And they say, well, the taxpayers won't understand it because we'll just call it a CR. And they'll think, oh, CR, that sounds like a pretty nifty government thing. And these people must be a lot smarter than us because they're going to do a CR. And they're going to do a continuing resolution. Boy, they must really be smart. They must be very skillful at handling this huge government bureaucracy that we have. Well, folks, I want to tell you, wrong. It's all wrong. What they're doing is wrong. What they're doing is they're taking our money away from us and our kids and our grandkids, and they're blowing it on stuff that doesn't need to be spent on. We've got more than 2,100 federal departments and agencies. Do we need that many agencies and departments to regulate us and our lives? I don't think so. No, we don't. But they've conned us into thinking that's what we need. We have to have that. We can't live. We'll die if we don't have this big federal government. It's not true. It wasn't that way when I was young. That's why I'm coming to you with my perspective. It has to go back to the way it was before, where we had freedom and liberty, and we lived by the American spirit, and we did the jobs Americans won't do because Americans always did those jobs before until the government convinced us that we didn't have to do them. So here's the budget process. Let's just take a hypothetical budget department. And let's just use a hypothetical number of $1 billion. Now, this would really be small because we're spending more than $4 trillion a year. Well, let's say $1 billion. The average increase for government agencies per year is 7%. So that means we're going to increase the budget of this department from $1 billion to $1,070 million. 70 million, well, no big deal. We got, we got $4 million, $4 trillion is what we're talking about. So how's that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal when you add them all up. So anyway, then somebody gets the idea that, hey, we really need to cut the budget. Well, right away, the Democrats will start saying, oh, you can't decrease the budget. You're going to be pushing grandma over the cliff in a wheelchair, and you're going to be stealing money from our kids in school, their school lunches, and we're going to shut down all the national parks, and we're going to do all these things. Well, that's wrong, too. That's not the way it works. So anyway, here's the budget now is proposed, and it's $1,070 million. $70 million, that's a lot of money. And so somebody says, oh, we got to cut this budget. So they say, well, we'll only give this department a 5% increase this year, and we'll just give them an extra $50 million for this year. Well, then what happens is, oh, everybody complains, oh, you've cut the budget, you're cutting the budget. No, you haven't cut the budget. All you've done is you've reduced the amount that they're going to increase it. Cutting the budget would be taking $70 million off of that $1 billion down to $930 billion. That would be a budget cut. And that's what we need to do, because we all know that you can get 10 to 20% of waste out of just about every department the government owns, probably 30 to 50%, if truth be known, and probably 2,000 of those 2,100 government agencies could be slashed completely, just completely eliminated. And guess what? We would still go on, because we could still get food from the grocery stores. We could still pay our rent. We could still pay our mortgages, because the government is not going to stop us from doing that just because they have some agencies that aren't on the books anymore. So here's what happens. They come up with these numbers, and then they add it all up, and they say, this is what we're going to spend. And it has nothing to do with what is going to come in. So if we know that our revenue is going to be about $4 trillion, we have to have a budget that is less than $4 trillion, because we have to pay interest on the national debt, and we have to have some money for emergencies. But that's not what happens. They spend more and they increase the credit limit. It's like the family that says, we can handle it, we can budget our money, and we can do anything we want to do, and we can handle anything that comes up, because we'll just get the credit card company to increase our spending limit. And when they increase our limit, we're good to go. Well, eventually that's not going to work, and it's not the right way to do it. It's improper accounting, and it's improper to be saddling our future descendants with debt. So in the 2020 plan, and we'll get right back to why I wrote this book, and I solved the budget problem. It's very simple. Here's how you do it, folks. Nobody ever thought about this before, because they're locked into paradigm paralysis. They think that the only way you can build the watch is to have all these gears and jewels and tiny parts. But you can do it differently. You want to know how to do the budget? You do it by percentages. So you say, okay, if we're going to bring in, let's use a hypothetical number, which is probably pretty close, of $4 trillion a year. We're going to spend a certain percentage, let's say 20% on the military, or whatever it's going to be. I'm just making up some numbers now. I gave you I have some very good examples in the book. So if you want to read the book and find out what's really behind this and all the reasons behind it, then you read the book. And I know you can read. Hey, everybody here knows how to read. You know how to read. The reason you've got paradigm paralysis is because you haven't been reading. You don't know what's going on. You have to read and find out and learn and get some knowledge so you understand what they are doing to us. So here's what happens. They spend money and they have no idea, who's going to get what. And then they tell us, oh, if we don't raise the limit and we don't put all this money in the budget, we're going to shut down the government. And that's going to be horrible because there's going to be some people who won't be able to take their family to the Yellowstone National Park. And we think, oh my God. Oh, and we won't be able to visit the White House. What do you mean? How much money does it cost to visit the White House? We already got a whole bunch of people working there anyway. They're already there. Secret Service is there. The Marines are there. The staff is there. So it costs us extra millions of dollars for people to visit the White House, to go on a tour. Come on, folks, it's crazy. Don't fall for this. It's just a big lie. So what we have to do is we have to budget by percentages. So if we can budget, say, 90% of our money, our budget, to the things that are really needed, we can keep out about 10% and use that for paying off the interest on the national debt, put some money in reserves, and be able to handle emergencies like what's happening in Houston right now, or what's happening in that whole area of Texas, which I wrote about in my last newsletter, because I worked in all those towns. I know all those towns. I know people that are there. That's my old stomping grounds. Anyway, we have to find a way to get people to understand that what's really wrong is that the people have paradigm paralysis, and we don't think that there's a different way to do it than the way the government has told us that we have to do it for all these many years. That's what's really happening. So let me tell you about the budget. Right now, and I'm just going to give you some round numbers so, don't make things complicated. I have it all in the book. Everything is in the 2020 book. I've got all the numbers in there. I've got it down. When you read this, you'll see that I've done the research. You'll see that I've done the numbers. You'll see that everything in there cannot be refuted. It cannot be challenged because it is all actual fact. It's numbers. It's statistics. So here's what happens. About 70% of our budget is non-discretionary spending. In other words, it goes to welfare and all types of things like that. So that's locked in, 70%. About 25%, actually it's 69%. I rounded up to 70, 69%. That's why I'm confusing myself. And about 25% of that money goes to discretionary spending, things that we spend money on, like the military, infrastructure, and education, all those types of things like that. And that leaves us about 6% of the money that we spend on paying off our national debt and doing stuff like that. Okay, now let's think about this a little bit. Is our non-discretionary spending, all those things that we're giving away, is that going to decrease over the next few years, or is it going to increase? Well, it's going to increase. And what about the money that is being spent on other things? That's going to go up too. So eventually everything's going to get squeezed. And I explain this in my book. Please read my book. It's so simple to understand what's happening to us today. We need to know what the government is doing to us. The political establishment has programmed us. They've indoctrinated us. They've locked us into this horrible disease of paradigm paralysis, to where our brains are paralyzed into thinking there's only one way that things can be done. There's more than one way things can be done. We can have a balanced budget by giving each one of these agencies and all these places where we need to spend money, all these everything we have to spend money on is put it to a percentage basis. and then say, this is the way you have to operate. This is all the money you have. You have no more money to do this. That's what happens to that family, that eventually a credit card company says, we're not raising your debt limit anymore. And then pretty soon you can't make the payments on the credit card because you can't afford the interest on the debt, right? You can't afford the interest on it, and you can't make the minimum payment. So what do? You go bankrupt. And that's what's going to happen to America today. We're going to go bankrupt, and we're going to leave this mess for our kids and grandkids. And that's what I am dead set against. And that's why I'm talking to you today. I want you to understand, please stop buying into the politicians and their con game. This scam that they're running, things can only be done one way. And please, buy my book. Just buy the book and read the book. Look, buy the book, and if you don't believe what's in the book, I'll give you your money back. I will. I'll give you your money back. And if you come to me and say, Bill, I want your book, but I can't afford it because we've reached our credit limit and we've gone bankrupt, I'll send you the book. Because you have to educate yourself. What's happening is the government's not educating us. They're indoctrinating us. We have to educate ourselves. The government indoctrinates us. We have to educate ourselves. And we have to wake up. And I keep hearing people say, well, we got to wake up. Well, yeah, that's good. You know, we got to wake up. It's about time we woke up. But we have to do more than wake up. We have to be enlightened. And we have to enlighten those around us. And we have to explain to others why they have paradigm paralysis, and tell them about the Swiss watch makers and about Galileo and all this. It's all in my book. I laid it all out for you. All you have to do is read the book, and it reads like a novel. It's for people who are just discovering all these various ways of busting paradigms. It's all about them just having discussions and conversations about how to do it, just like we would do if we were out at dinner or over at somebody's house at a party or a gathering or something like that. That's all it is. It's a book of everybody discussing things, but it's a book that's written on, they explain how they researched and they studied the background and the history of every issue, for example, like immigration or education. Then they did statistical analysis on it. So I've done all the statistical analysis for you. It's all there. You can verify it. You can go, and I did it on all the .gov sites. It's the government's numbers. I didn't make them up. I didn't get them from somebody, some crackpot on the radio or TV or CNN or somebody like that. I got it all from .gov. Okay? Then I did cost-benefit analysis. I did root cause analysis. I did everything, to come up with common sense solutions, thinking outside of the box. And that's what I need you to do. Think outside the box. I know you can read. People say, well, I can't read. And I say, well, what do you mean? You don't know how to read? I thought everybody knew how to read in America. Well, maybe not everybody does. But the people I'm talking to that are watching this, if you got a computer, you know how to read. Get a spine, folks. Get a spine. Read. Get some knowledge. You have to do this. And don't say, well, it costs too much money. It's $20. You spend tens of thousands of dollars a year on tattoos and every other damn thing you can think of. Do something for your kids and your grandkids. Get an education, and then you can teach them not to have paradigm paralysis. So I've been talking to you for quite some time today, and I'm going to continue this discussion. I'm going to continue trying to educate you. I'm going to continue to try and explain these things to you in a common sense way. And folks, I just need you to stop listening to what the government tells you, because they're not telling you the truth. Politicians are not telling you the truth. They are not your heroes. They are not your idols. They are not going to save you. They're going to bankrupt you. That's what they're going to do. And that's what they've been doing. And they've taken your jobs away from you because they convince you that you won't do the jobs Americans won't do. And like I've said before, I challenge anybody to bring me their list of jobs that they did that Americans won't do and compare them with mine, because you'll lose every time, because I've done every job that Americans won't do. And I think I'm doing pretty well. I think I've educated myself pretty well. And I think I'm living a pretty good life. Hey, I got to go back to Hawaii where I was stationed. I got to go to Pearl Harbor, revisit Pearl Harbor. Got to do a lot of things in my life. And guess what? I'm not in debt. I don't owe anybody anything. I don't have a car payment. I don't have a house payment. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have a credit card debt. Zero. How did I do that? I started saving money when I was back at 14 years old. How about you trying some of that? Okay, folks, thanks a lot for watching. I appreciate it. I hope that I've helped you some. I hope that I can help America become great again. America, no, that's a Trump's deal, isn't it? Mine is restore American exceptionalism. People say, well, were we ever exceptional? We were a lot more exceptional when I was a youngster than we are now. Let me tell you, we were. Okay. Have fun, boys and girls. Have a good week. Come back and visit me again next Tuesday or whenever you get a chance to watch this. Look forward to seeing you. And it's been a pleasure talking with you today.